finally we have editing! Please let me know how I did. This is everything I read in December ranked from worst to best. Let's go! Number 13, The Meltdown, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Book 13, by Jeff Kinney. If you read a Diary of the Wimpy Kid book before, you know what this is about. We have Greg Heffley, average kind of middle school kid. In this one, it's winter time and he's looking for things to do in winter because his parents have kind of forced him to stay outside. And we look at the kind of situation on the street with the kids at the top of the hill versus the kids at the bottom of the hill going to war. Why this is the worst is because it's kind of more of the same, and it only really picks up towards the end, like the last sort of third to quarter of the book, which is kind of the norm for Diary of the Wimpy Kid. The action on the blurb only really happens towards the end. All the rest is kind of build up and fluff. Number 12, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Kind of shocking given how popular this book is, but if you watch my whole review video on that, you'll know why. It is not as deep as it is making out that it is. In that video I said I would give it 3.5 stars, but really let's just knock that down to 3 stars on further reflection. It's pretty average to me. It just falls flat and it is kind of a cop-out in regards to the messages that it is going to send. The ending is predictable. It wasn't allowed to end any other way given the setup. If you want more on that, watch the video, link in the description. Number 11, Guaranteed to Bend Your Brain by Kjartan Poskitt. Probably messed that up. This is one of the Murderous maths books, and as someone who loves maths, I had to pick this up even though, you know, it's a bit below university grade level. But even for a Murderous maths book, the maths in here wasn't that interesting. The selling point of these books is that they teach you the stuff you won't learn in school, but most of the stuff you will learn in school. I did, however, learn a couple of interesting things about this, more on the historical side, about the mathematician Tartaglia and its feud with Cardano, I believe it was, over the cubic formula rather. But I've definitely learned more from other books in the series, such as Easy Questions, Evil Answers, and The Murderous Math of Everything. These books are kind of like horrible histories, but for maths, if you don't know what they are. Number 10. Unfortunately, the other maths book I read this month didn't rank much higher. Amazing Algebra by Javier Fresán, I believe. The premise of this book is actually pretty cool. It is written as a dialogue between two mathematicians, Andre Weil, I do not know how to pronounce these, and Claude Levi-Strauss. They were part of the Bourbaki collaboration, and so this book is told as a dialogue between them. Unfortunately, it doesn't really utilize them as characters. They don't feel like characters in this book, and I know this is meant to be a non-fiction book, but I reckon they would have been better just writing this as a standard maths book, honestly. It was just disappointing in the execution. They didn't feel like distinct characters. I can't remember who said what. And there was also a whole chapter where one of them was like, here's my notes on this subject, read them. And so it went back to a standard form. The topic of the book is group theory and algebra. And so it doesn't really make sense to me that one mathematician is having to explain this to another professional mathematician. It's a bit odd that the other wasn't familiar with his concepts, or at least that he was having to have everything spelled out to him. A lot of the historical stuff, which I'm normally really interested in, was just boring dialogue, info dumping, not really done very well as other books in this series have been. The most interesting part of this book was the chapter that discussed music. That was the last chapter. Also, I think this book is a bit advanced for the target demographic of this series, which is the sort of everyman that wants to learn more about maths and how it applies in our world. The music chapter does okay with that, the rest of it doesn't. So sadly, cool premise, but the execution was disappointing. Number 9, Bob the Builder and the Elves by Emily Rodda. No, this is not that Bob the Builder. This is an Aussie kids book. I read it as a kid, or rather listened to it as an audiobook. But it's shorter than I remember. But it is a nice story. It has a nice wholesome ending. So I can't really complain too much about it. Number 8, Just Wacky by Andy Griffiths. This book is also known as Just Crazy. And this copy is actually signed. So this was a nice find in a secondhand bookshop. I actually did a video reacting to one of the stories in this book that I thought was pretty ridiculous, kind of gross, and would never get published today. However, all of the other stories were kind of tame in comparison, and some of them were good, but some of them didn't really live up to the title and weren't as crazy or I guess wacky as I remembered from my childhood. Reading this as a class novel when I was like 8. But I don't think it's bad. I just think there are better Andy Griffiths books even in that series. Like Just Annoying, Just Stupid and Just Shocking are better. Number 7 is Homestuck, Act 5, Act 1. This is the part of the webcomic that is known as Hivebent, and this is by Andrew Hussie. If you don't know what Homestuck is, it's a webcomic, so a comic that is published on the internet, and it is typically through flash games, animations, and some text logs. This comic has a physical release, although only the first 6 volumes of it have been made into books, and unfortunately there have not been any plans to go any further with that for a number of years. However, this is still a cool thing to have, and it does have this author's commentary at the bottom. I think it does as good a job of putting it into the medium of a physical book as well as it could do for something like that that's normally animated and interactive. This is the 4th of the 6 physical books that exist. It's about a group of kids that play a game on the internet that's sort of virtual reality, crosses different universes, and there's the trolls. If you've seen those grey trolls with the zodiac signs on their shirts and the orange horns, this is where they're from. Number 6 is Heroes of Legend books 1 and 2 by L.A. Hammer. This is a fantasy story that follows all of the usual tropes. As the review on the front says, derivative, but skillfully executed. It doesn't seem to do anything really new in those tropes, aside from incorporating various mythological figures in it, like Greek mythology, Celtic mythology, and Chinese mythology. Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, is a prominent character in this as one of the mentors to one of the 3 protagonists. And the mythology of it was the main draw of it for me, because I really like mythology. It doesn't really do anything new with these tropes, as I said, but it was still a fun read, especially the action scenes. It was a bit odd in that a lot of the time it referenced real world locations or places that were very similar to real locations in their names and cultures, but then other times it seemed like a whole other fantasy world. According to the author page on Amazon, it is supposed to be some kind of parallel version of our world, but that was a bit odd, even a little bit jarring and immersion breaking. But other than that, I think it's fine. If you just sort of know going in that it's supposed to be our world but a little bit different, then you'll be fine. The parts that I enjoyed the most were the Sun Wukong bits. This basically has 3 protagonists with these different spirit guides, and they have to deal with this vampire invasion. Typical chosen ones, magical weapons and items, evil villain who is just evil and trying to take over the world. As I said, all of the usual tropes except for the use of mythological figures. Number 5 is Rebecca the Wrecker by Peter McFarlane. This is another kids book, and it's a story about a girl named Rebecca whose parents are always saying she's really destructive, she's a real wrecker. So she decides to start her own wrecking business in the front yard, where kids come and bring stuff and then they wreck it. Unfortunately, they have this snobby neighbour that doesn't like it and plots to get this whole thing shut down. It's a short book, it's a nice little story that ties up most loose ends. I just wish we found out in the end what happened to the neighbour's kid who gets involved in this whole thing. Did they become friends, or did anything come of that? Other than that, I think it's a nice little story. Number 4 is Vampire by Manuela Dunn Maschetti. I don't know how to pronounce that. This book goes into vampire lore, origins of the sort of tropes that we see in fiction, like garlic, repelling them, killing them with a stake, all the powers they have, how people get turned into vampires. It has supposed testimony from people who've encountered them. It has information on famous historical people who are associated with vampires, like Elizabeth Bathory, and a person that was the inspiration for Dracula. I just wish it went into the actual mythological origins a bit more, as well as the literary origins of vampires. For example, the Impusai from Greek mythology. I wish it touched on stuff like that. Other than that, though, it was a good introduction to literary vampire lore and the tropes and the historical figures that are associated with them, and it also has all these creepy pictures and things in it. Number 3 was Tigers by M.A. Bennett. This is book 4 in the Stag series, which is a series about these rich people at this private school, and this girl who finds out that there's this whole cult that's been going on where they try and hunt down people who are any sort of poor people, people of colour, all sorts of things like that to maintain their superiority for funsies. And so the protagonist, Greer MacDonald, tries to get that shut down and investigated. In this one, she goes to India to find out about her friend Shafine's dad, who was somehow wrapped up in this group. And so this one touches on themes of imperialism and the influences of the British Empire in India when it was still part of the empire. And I like this book. I like this series a lot. I'm really excited to see how it concludes. I found that the exploration of Shafine's dad's backstory was hard to read, not in a way of it was bad writing, but in that it was sad. How he wanted to be like all these rich white people that he admired, and it was so hard seeing him struggle to fit in and then fight back against them when they rejected him. I think there's some very important themes explored in this series. Number 2 is Assassination Classroom, Volume 12. This is a manga, and the series, if you didn't know, is about a group of kids who are kind of in the absolute bottom of the bottom in their school. They're in what is literally called the end class, where all the kids that the school doesn't want to acknowledge but still has to keep for whatever reason go. And there's this alien who's shown up and threatened to destroy the world in a year's time, and he, for some reason, wanted the job of teaching this class. And so the students have been recruited by the government to try and assassinate him, but the alien is pretty much invincible. And so this story, the students learn to work together, believe in themselves, develop skills, and train to kill this alien. In this particular volume, they go up against the best class in school in a sporting competition. They learn about not getting too big for your boots, taking responsibility for their mistakes. There are a lot of valuable lessons to be learned from the series, and that's something I want to explore more on this channel. And number 1, the best book I read in December, was Heartstopper Volume 5, which I love so much. I did a whole video talking about all the important things that were in this book that meant a lot to me, like the exploration of infantilization, which is an issue I've experienced personally, and also the reveal of ace representation, which also means a lot because I am asexual. This is just a wholesome series filled with lots of lovely LGBTQ representation. The art style is adorable. The relationships are adorable. It's a wholesome story that makes you feel all warm and cozy inside, and if you haven't read it, please do go do that. I think it's a very important series for teens and adults to experience, to even just learn more about LGBT plus people and just empathize with them. It also explores a lot of struggles and things that teens experience, including wanting to take relationships further, safe sex practices, exploring your future, how to choose your university, and how important that might be or might not be, depending on where you want to go. At least in this particular volume, it explores a lot more things elsewhere, like mental health, problematic relationships and how to escape them, a lot of different things. Thank you for watching my video. Please like and subscribe if you liked it, and as I say, do lots of maths, read lots of books, and you'll have a great day.